Hello and welcome to Star Piece, part of GOCast podcast, where we get to know your favorite personalities and leaders in the world of Pokemon Go a little bit better. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm joined by my co-host, Lachlan.
G'day, how's it going, buddy?
It's going. How are you? Long time no see.
I am excellent.
He's excellent. That's the best. That's the best you can get. Did you know that? Pokemon Go taught me that. Awesome.
I'm excellent.
Oh, we love a bit of wordplay. Yeah, that's right. And we are joined by our special guest this time, Milo, also known as PoGoMiloUK. How's it going?
Hello there, boys.
Hello.
Lovely to see you both.
Yes. We just got back. We just got back from New York Go Fest rather recently. So it was nice to see you there. And as I understand it, Lachlan was also in your neck of the woods rather recently.
Yes. What was it? A couple of months ago?
Yeah. But I was just thinking, back from New York recently, it's been 2 years. What are you on about?
As we've been to the Go Fest in Florida, and we've been up to Canada and Go Fest 26. Goodness me.
That's right. And now in 2027, we're really thriving. We certainly are. These are just jokes. These are just jokes, folks. All right.
This is putting the pressure on Chris to edit this in good time, from what I've heard.
That's right.
I don't know. I think we're all going to have a great time at the South Korea Go Fest next weekend.
Yeah, actually a South Korea Go Fest is probably not an unthinkable thing. That could definitely happen.
Well, like 5 years ago, we had the safari thing there, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. We did. Yes.
Oh, there was one in the pandemic as well. You know, that thing that happened 8 years ago.
God, I don't know what that was.
Now we're just going to confuse everybody. I'm going to get this out in a timely manner, and people are going to be like, "What are you talking about? What is happening?"
A load of irrelevant rubbish. That's what.
Okay. Well, we've been talking for a few minutes already, and I'm doing a terrible job of hosting because we have not yet even properly introduced Milo insofar as only his name. We haven't gotten to know him at all. So who is Milo, and what does he do, Pokemon or otherwise?
Okay. Well. Pokemon Go wise, I do video content creation as PoGoMiloUK, and also I'm part of the Incensed podcast. And it may be recently, it may not be. We were doing a collab crossover with Chris and then Kyle in New York Go Fest. Mm-hmm. Whenever that was in the past, we're not so sure.
It was recent.
I'm going to have faith in you.
Kyle's only just hit level 75, so
Trust me, Chris, as anybody who edits a podcast on a weekly basis, I feel your pain with it. It's like, I need to stay on top of it no matter what.
Yeah.
But that's me. It's like flat out content creation, be it audio and or video format, really.
Okay, excellent. So what about outside of Pokemon? Yeah, what else do you got going on? Yeah, got any other hobbies besides Go? Because from the outside, it's very easy to be like, oh, this just must be the only dimension to Milo, but we know better.
It would be nice to say yes, but to be honest, the creation side of things is so all-consuming, particularly in the last couple of years where things have really started to grow nicely, not just with my own channel, but with the podcast as well, and getting to live events and things like that. So it's more, if there's a hobby on the side, it gets incorporated into Pokemon Go, whether it's hiking, a bit of travel, a road trip or two. And yeah, basically nothing's off camera these days apart from me sleeping. And I will not start streaming my sleep sessions.
Oh no, so you already did that in 2086.
2080. Okay, we're really. How old are we at this point?
I've lost count. Ever since that anti-aging stuff came out in the 2050s, it's been kind of a.
Well, look, 2086. We're celebrating Pokemon's 90th birthday this year. It's very exciting.
Do we just guess in age of podcast episodes at this point? How many episodes of Star Piece are we down the road?
We've circled back. This has been the third or fourth reboot of this show. Yeah,
I've been on 47 times.
Oh, jeez.
At this point, you don't even know if I'm artificial intelligence or not.
I am eager to hop into the YouTube stuff because that point that you made about things being sort of all consuming, especially once you start going from dedicated sort of topical niche videos, right? Because there are different types of YouTubers, right? People that sit at their desk
100%.
and they do educational videos, and then vlogging is an entirely other beast, and that I feel like is the one that's all consuming. But before we get there, let's just talk about Pokemon real quick. Just lay some groundwork. Where does your journey with Pokemon begin?
Everything kicks off in 2016. So when Pokemon Go started, in fact, I know a lot of people started day one. What was it? Was it the 7th of July? Because it was literally across the New York Go Fest, the 8-year anniversary, which feels like decades ago at this point. That's when I began, but I started towards the end of July 2016 because my old phone at the time couldn't download the game. So I started a little bit late, and that is really my first dive into the Pokemon universe, as it were, because I wasn't really into it as a kid, doing cards or main series games, to be honest. It's grown and fluctuated using Pokemon Go to now the point where it is, as we've said, all-consuming, a very, very significant part of my life.
Yeah.
And now at this point, I have dived into main series games. I'm not a TCG person, but I can respect and understand a little bit about it. So it's really 2016 up until now, 2064. So that's
all right.
it.
So I guess that kind of begs the question then, because it's very rare, right, that we find or talk to anybody, especially at the level that we operate at with our investment and commitment to the game, right? Of it's either you found it through Go, or it's been with you your entire life, and there's almost no middle ground, right? So why not earlier in life? Were you too cool for school, or were you like into Beyblade instead, and so that that entire purview was covered? Or I mean, I jokingly say Beyblade, but I mean, honestly, it could have been something else. Like I
had a few of those. Yeah.
I grew up being torn between Pokemon and Digimon. I still love them both.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
I made room for both. Maybe it's just another detriment to my life, but I'll deal with that in the future in some therapy session, I'm sure.
Where did you go?
2160 is where the therapy sessions really changed for all of us.
This joke gets funner every single time I bring it up.
At some point, we'll ditch it through the show, I'm sure. I had family members who were into Pokemon, cousins, etc., and it just didn't gel with me as a kid, because I've always been a big petrol head, a fan of cars and motor vehicles, that sort of thing, and that was my passion as a child, was understanding the automotive world. You probably heard on Incensed podcast, there's a lot of jokes about me and my fandom with Jeremy Clarkson and any of the Grand Tour and Clarkson's Farm and that sort of thing. That literally festered from me when I was 6 months old or so, and ever since then I still am a car fanatic. So that was kind of my main interest, was understanding cars, how they work. What was it? I learned to drive when I was 12 using an external car club thing that is a sort of like a charity run of club, as it were, in the UK.
Oh, is it like one of those little Barbie like things? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. We're racing them around the racetrack. It was really good fun. A little bit dangerous. That club is basically charity run by people who, you have the police who get involved with it and sort of help younger people understand how driving works, the rules and regs, basically before you driving past your test, hopefully. And that was my entire weekend life when, from the age of about 12 to 18, pretty much every single Sunday, my dad and I would go to an airfield or a racetrack and do this thing and drive a car for 8 to 10 hours. So
oh my gosh.
There wasn't really time for another hobby or gaming. The only gaming I would have done would have been good old Need for Speed.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So that's certainly a very different Sunday school to what I think a lot of listeners might have experienced.
Perhaps, yes. Although I said the school I went to in Bristol had Saturday school, so I only had one day off a week. So yeah, time was limited, shall we say.
Imagine doing a comm day, but you're stuck at school.
I dread to think.
Look, with Slakoth Community Day Classic, that's happening this weekend. It's...
Still haven't got a shundo.
But you have the Shenundy now, so that's nice. And he's wearing that fez.
The fez. Oh my god, a fez slack off.
What event was that for again? Was that for a hospitality week?
Yeah, the annual hospitality week. Yeah.
And how long's that been annual? Like
2 years. It's relatively
only.
new.
Oh, it's a really recent addition. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
It was weird. It was a week that lasted 9 days, and I'm like, do they know what a week is?
That's when they changed the calendar. That was like 25 years ago. Yeah.
Well, I do like the new calendar.
Short events.
Yeah.
13 months in a year is a lot more logical than 12.
It does make sense. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
We get one extra com day a year.
That's right. We have an entire extra month. Exactly right.
Wild.
Exactly right. Yeah. We might even get a second GoFest season sometime. We have an early summer and a late summer. That'd be
nice.
Well, they ran out
that.
of tours when they hit Generation 28. So, like,
Right.
you know.
So you kind of have an interesting potential answer for this then, because usually when we ask somebody what their favorite generation is, it's almost always the first generation that they were actually able to really dig into.
Yes, their first main series game, I guess.
Right. So like for myself, I definitely picked it up on Red and Blue, but it wasn't until Gold and Silver that I was like, oh wow, like I get it. Like I can sink my teeth into this. And that was what imprinted on me.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, coming from Go almost exclusively, what's your favorite generation? Have you been able to choose one? And then I guess why did you end up landing on that one?
It's a good question. And I think for me, it probably expands to my fondness of the time when this generation got released and looking back how it got released. For me, Generation 3 is my top pick. Hoenn, and obviously we had Hoenn Tour 170 years ago. It was a really lovely event. When that got released initially back, it was the Halloween event of 2017 when the first wave of that popped in with the 3 ghost types and their evolutions straight away as shiny. Back in the day, me and my community would do night hunts because every new event that dropped in wasn't local time. It started globally at one specific point. So for us, it was always 9 p.m. in the evening, which would have been a complete pain to do as a content creator back then in the UK. But as a local squad, we got out, like, I think 30, 40 people out on Halloween when that event drops to go shiny hunting at 9 p.m. until about 2 a.m. And there was just such a fond memory with that shiny hunt. And subsequently, the different waves of Generation 3 that got added with, I think Shiny Aron dropped later in sort of January, February 2018, and so on and so forth. And then learning as we go along about the Gen 3 starters, they get their megas and all of that stuff. All 3 of them are fantastic shiny families. That sort of sold it for me. And then when the legendaries popped in, I was like, oh my god, Kyogre, Groudon, Rayquaza. Let's forget about the Reggies in Pokemon Go, but it's got a solid amount of legendaries and some really good mythicals as well. And I was like, and it's a big dex actually as well.
Look, one day they'll eventually put Reggie-Trumpet into Pokemon Go. Until then, we've got to...
That's the new sound type, yeah?
Yeah. Well, sound's a very old type at this point, you know.
Okay.
I was back in Generation 41. But no, like, Hoenn is obviously infamous for its trumpets. So if you ever do get a chance...
Mini horns, yeah.
Like, next time you're out in the town and you've just got your earpods in, just pop on the Gen 3 GBA soundtrack and you'll have such a great time with just mouth trumpets everywhere. It's great.
Fabulous. I'll make a note of that.
Even though Crystal was my first Pokemon game, my copy of Emerald, like I was just looking at it and the contact points have been worn from how many times it was inserted in out. So like we gotta love Gen 3.
Do love a bit of Generation 3.
Those
Definitely.
2 generations have a lot of special spot in my heart, especially because the Gen 3 games I played, I never had a Charmander near my team, so it was good. Life was good. The world was at peace. and in Emerald, you could get a Cyndaquil after you completed the Hoenn Dex. So what's not to love?
That's fair. I guess just because it's not Crystal version is the only reason that I wouldn't love it more.
Yeah,
it's
but
a really
Crystal,
good game.
Crystal's missing a battle frontier.
That wasn't for me anyway, so we're good. That's fine. That's fine. Before I move on, I do want to make sure we stop and do the necessary question that we are legally obligated to ask this.
Yeah, I saw the NDA. Ooh.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, thank you for signing that, by the way. Favorite Pokemon?
Favorite Pokemon for me has got to be Trico.
Yeah,
Gen 3. I love the shiny. It's my favorite shiny in Pokemon as well. I love that blue. I'm a big fan of like reptiles and geckos especially, so that fits the bill for me. And also, it's incredibly useful in Pokemon Go.
That's right. Yeah, it's got a great mega and everything too. We love it.
Oh yes.
All
right, so Milo, we're talking about your career in YouTube and across the space. What was the initial gateway into content creation or YouTube creation or video creation in general for you in your life?
I guess the whole thing began, goodness me, when was it? Probably back in 2010 or 11, when, doing the good old GCSEs and stuff like that, found it very, very boring and laborious, and my mind would turn to short film making or sort of that kind of thing. And there were loads of creators back in the day who were huge on doing that sort of thing. You had Key and Peele, you had Freddie Wong, and Tomska was another one, who all did these sort of short YouTube skits or short movies, be it a comedy one or an action one with loads of special effects and that sort of thing. And that got me interested in making videos or short films, getting into special effects and VFX. And that's kind of how that interest almost overtook my previous one, which was sculpture, 3D sculpture with either clay or plasticine and stop motion animation. So that kind of falls under a little bit of movie making as well with stop motion stuff. So it's always been an interest in some way with making videos, but be it in a completely different way to what I do at the moment. And that led to me going to do an art foundation year where the movie making passion really came through, being able to do some pretty cool projects and keep going with film directing, film editing. And that took me to film school and sort of going through that process, 3-year BA in practical filmmaking. And that's originally my career was sort of in post-production and editing of kind of anything that I could get my hands on. And
so if you want to do some post-production, we have this lovely side hustle. It's unpaid. It's completely volunteering. It's called the GOCast podcast.
Seriously. It's
right.
Like, that's the whole thing of, oh yeah, this will be a really good experience. Like, yeah, I'd love to be able to pay my bills in experience, but I can't.
Exactly, right.
But you know what's better than experience? Exposure.
Exposure. Yeah, that's the other word that people throw around in the industry as well. So I'd love to be able to do that for some exposure, but Adobe don't accept their subscription payment in exposure, I'm afraid.
No, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, they did.
In the hole right away, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So for a while, it was sort of like personal projects and just passion projects when I could do, and then YouTube became a medium of where I could post stuff for film school, like projects and things like that, where you'd have to upload the link and they say do it on YouTube or do it on Vimeo, and Vimeo required a payment service. I'm like, I'm broke as it is as a film student in London, no thanks. And then way back in the day, I tried to do a little bit of vlogging, which would have been behind the scenes of the films I was making. So sort of this weird mishmash of being on camera, being behind the camera, acting in my own short movies and this sort of thing, and kind of just getting a feel for everything. That was how it was until really the pandemic kicked into gear. However many decades ago we're talking, I don't know, Lachlan might have to fill in on that. How many years ago we're talking?
It's 2024.
The pandemic is 3 years away.
Hang on, what, round 2?
Well, a second, yeah.
Let's not go for that. But the pandemic really killed any movie making, film making industry stuff. The only thing that was really getting made in the early days of the pandemic were adverts or video messages about COVID. So I was like, right, I need to. At some point, I think in late 2019, I'd begun doing Pokemon Go videos, kind of as a just a little, again, a passion project. Really, I've been encouraged by a lot of my local crew to give it a go. I'd filmed Germany GOFest from 2019, but took an age editing it. So that was kind of my first experience of filming something. I filmed, no, it wasn't actually. Sorry, I filmed the original EV Community Day, but that was meant to be like a little 4 or 5 minute video in 2018 for the community to kind of look back on. Really kind of got going with the first video in October 2019, which was Trapinch Community Day, of all things to begin on. And
Trapinch is a lovely Pokemon, and if you're listening to this, our resident Trapinch expert, we stand Trapinch.
I will say, despite the fact of my love for the Generation 3, decks and everything, Trapinch, I could quite happily let that one go, to be honest. Maybe we're scarred from events and things like that.
Put it in perspective of Gen 3. By the time of Gen 3, these were the dragons. Dratini's family, Kingdra, and then Trapinch was obtainable. Rayquaza was on the box art. Not too sure how to get him, especially in Ruby Sapphire. And if you figured out where to find a Bagon without using the internet or a guide, you are truly a god.
So this is, again, the perspective of somebody who's played the main series games versus someone who didn't. Because when I'm looking at it, it's like they introduced Trapinch and it was a bit dead. And then Flygon was a bit dead. But I guess we can come back to the good old Trapinch discussion.
When you look at Flygon's awesome. It was very easily accessible in a route right after the fire gym, because you needed the go-go goggles to be able to go through the desert. So before the 5th gym you could get a dragon. And previously, the only way to get a dragon was through gambling. So this was a big win for a lot of people. And for those who don't understand what I mean by gambling, there was the Goldenrod game corner in Gen 2. Allowed you to get a Dratini before the 3rd gym.
I will take your word for it.
Yeah. My memory is also a little bit fuzzy. It's been a hot minute, so I'm also going to have to throw my confidence behind Lachlan.
Yeah. So I'll take he sounds so confident in what he's saying. I'm going to believe it.
He
100%.
does. Yeah.
But really, the pandemic is where I started to push the YouTube videos and that sort of thing, because it was the only thing we could really do. And a lot of people back in the days of the pandemic, the early days especially, it was really a case of, people were stuck at home without items. That was kind of what the whole thing was. People didn't have Pokestops and stuff like that. And I'm quite fortunate where I live. The joke on Incensed a lot of the time is I live on 7 stops. Realistically, it's 4, but 4 is still pretty insane. So I would literally say on the end of the videos, like, if you need gifts or items, comment below and I can send you stuff, because I have items to spare and that sort of thing. So it was almost like a goodwill service while stuck at home doing the good old GBL days or the play from home community days sorts of thing. And through the pandemic, really, the Pokemon Go videos kind of started to gain some traction, and even out of that kept on growing, just due to the nature of how the UK handled COVID, particularly during the summer. A lot of people in the summer of 2020 were stuck properly inside with either like military lockdown or anything like that. Whereas in the UK, we were like, we're free to roam around as long as you're in a group of 10 people or less. And like, who on earth, I mean, literally, who on earth is going to police? Are you a group of 10? Yes. Being followed by another group of 10? Yes. We don't know them. Trust us.
Right. Sure.
Team Mystic over there. We don't know them.
So we're segregating into different teams. But it was literally just all of us in the UK were able to go around and play the community days or the events pretty much normally. So we were actually able to get the proper coverage of the events back in the day. And then, and now it's just my life.
I remember the Global Go Fest of 2020.
Yes.
And weather wasn't great here, but we could leave the house. We just had to be wearing a mask.
Okay.
At that particular time, because Brisbane City happened to have 0 COVID cases during that weekend somehow. Or like 1 COVID case, but they're in hospital. So we were allowed out. and then they've removed the masks in August, and then we went into lockdown again, like 2 days later.
Yeah.
There was 2 cases of COVID. It's fine. I'm not scarred, but that GoFest experience and just being able to walk around with people. And then on the Sunday, we all sat inside a shopping center food court, because that's where you were allowed to sit down in the shopping center, the food court, nowhere else.
Oh, really?
And because we had drinks in our hands or food in our hands, we could have our masks off to talk. And that food court hasn't had enough stops for us to lure up. So
you gotta live and breathe in the margins, like
yes,
that's.
But you
You've
couldn't
been sat here for 3 hours drinking that coffee.
Look, my pizza was really hot. I had to wait.
Yeah, I had to wait 8 hours for it to cool down.
This Diet Coke was too spicy. I had to wait for the ice to melt properly.
The American themed burger restaurant there was doing very well from us.
Oh sure, yeah. So Milo, when it comes to your Pokemon Go vlog, so it's great to hear how you started and when you started growing the channel and everything. And I know that this definitely has some tie-ins as well with the next topic we'll bring up, which is the Incensed podcast, which is the other part of your content creation sort of repertoire, I suppose.
Oh yes.
But before that, I do kind of want to ask. This is always really interesting. When you were like refining and working very hard on your videos and making them more frequent and all these sorts of things, did you look to other content creators in this space for some examples, some research, right, for yourself? And if so, were there any channels in particular that you were like, I really like what they were doing here, I'm going to take a bit from this one, or this one particular content creator had a big impact on my content?
Yeah, of course. There are people who've been in this content creation space for years and years and have got very good at what they do, and been a very big fan of a lot of the big names like Trainer Tips and back in the day Reversal. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of like where I viewed what my content would kind of be like and what I enjoyed about the game. And for me, it was raiding, the fascination with 100%ers and that sort of numbers game, as well as shiny hunting and playing the events. So I found myself going along the routes of the likes of the Trainer Club, Billy Lutz, with trying to do some info videos and create compact information pockets that people could look for GoFest, for example, and shiny hunting grinds like JT Valor would do, and kind of seeing what I could do with an event on one particular day. So giving almost a realistic view of, what you could get when you played an event, battling with good old RNG. And the more down the road we got with making videos and making them more frequent, then you see the likes of Pokedaxi. And I think as a smaller creator, it'd be very foolish to not look at people who are doing different styles of content, different formats, particularly with the likes of TikTok and now YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels. There are people who obviously now we've got to know over the last couple of years doing live events who back in the day I hadn't heard of. Landor Alpha, for example, seeing what he does with his compact shorts versus obviously his IRL streaming stuff. You try and cherry pick and go like, I really like what they've done there, but I need to do my own style and twist on it, as it were. And you're always playing with different ideas and how things work, even if it comes down to titles and YouTube thumbnails. So you sort of look and think, is that working? Is this working? Can I try something like this? Really I could almost argue and say like there's a piece of every content creator that I've tried to emulate, I would guess, even down to some, one of my favorite moments of doing content creation would be the not the YouTube thumbnails like Lachlan's just alluded to, because doing those in the streets of London, you do feel like an absolute idiot. People look at you and like, are you okay?
For audio listeners,
I'm just stretching my mouth out, it out.
For our lovely audio listeners, we do have a video version on Spotify and YouTube, but as our lovely audio only listeners, this is the audio commentary
any
for what
YouTuber
just occurred.
thumbnail.
Lachlan opened his mouth as if he was about to start firing his laser.
Okay.
There was a shiny on screen. That was the deal.
That's the shock.
That's the vibe.
Or maybe it wasn't a shiny. Who knows? But
it's blurred out. You're not seeing it. You have to watch.
But is it blurred out enough that you could probably guess what
it's never blurred out
enough? No, it's never blurred out enough. No. Oh my god. No, it never is.
From experience, like, if you don't blur it out enough, everyone's like, I know what it is, but I'm going to click the video anyway because I want to see it.
Exactly
right.
Thing. Exactly right.
But honestly, one of my favourite bits of content I've ever done was with Ian Waterfall and actually, hysterically, Billy the Trainer Club, when Ian and I drove from London all the way through Europe to Amsterdam for a Lowland Geodude Community Day. And that we tried to give like not necessarily a trainer tips kind of vibe, but it was kind of like a bit of travel and that sort of thing mixed with a bit of gameplay that the Trainer Club would kind of do for a vlog and kind of packaging it into one weirdly epic but awful Community Day adventure. And that was so much fun doing that sort of thing.
So how is the YouTube going for you then? Like, is your channel, like, is it where you thought it was going to be? And from where you are now today, where would you like it to go?
So in terms of where the channel is, it's kind of like a mixed bag of what you would expect, because when you're doing these content things, if you're vlogging the events and what's happening in the game at the time, you are very much at the mercy of what content is available, and then trying in a very short space of time, because sometimes the events are literally 4 days long. You're like, right, I now know the event. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with it. Can I make something interesting? And then sometimes the answer is, no, I can't. I literally can't do anything other than, try and grind for a shiny and not get it. So there was a bit of a dead spot where I think it was after Sinnoh Tour, the next season was not quite as hype as we'd suspected with the content. And getting things going again, particularly with the GoFest season, always really good. But you are very much at the mercy of what quality of events are available and what you can do with it. Because if people are not interested in the event themselves, they're very unlikely to want to watch a video about somebody else playing the dead event. So it would be nice to be a bit further ahead, but where I'm at and where I'm steadily growing organically with what we're doing, I'm pretty happy with how things are going. But it would be nice to obviously grow and reach more people. That's the goal.
And on that front of being at the whims of the game developer and how they decide to structure their events, do you often try and... Because I know for me, the last few months have been very boring because we've been basically day one players. Or in my case, casual for the first year and a half. Water Week 2018 happened and it's been daily ever since.
Yeah.
But do you... Because I know I struggle with trying to find things to look forward to in this game, but I've just been hosting a bunch of meetups this week using #9TickCampfire.
Nice.
And
done.
The amount of people that show up and are so excited about catching Stack Attacker for the first time, and I'm like, you do 2 raids, they give you 1 for free during this event. Or, hey, Lachlan, do you have a Fearow? I need a Fearow to complete my Kanto Dex. And I'm looking at them like, Fearow's what you're missing? And then you just have to remember that these events are structured in a way that these recurring Pokemon are there for a reason most of the time. And it is sometimes really hard to take that. I've got the shiny family for that done because I had a community day. But Timmy down the street, who only just turned 10 and only just got his Pokemon license, that's probably his first chance to get a Rattata.
Yeah. And I mean, that is a good point.
Yeah.
So how do you find striking that balance when maybe your audience is excited to see you play an event, but for you it might not hit the mark?
So back in the day, when perhaps I was a little bit more vocal about repetitions of events and that sort of thing, it would have really grated me. But now it's more a case of, you look at things, go, there are so many new players to the game, and you have to look and go, right, what could somebody potentially want? So you have to look at it sort of objectively, not what you're chasing specifically, although that's what you're going to grind in the video. But when you give an out view of the event. You can say, like, you can go for this, blah, blah. This has a shiny boost for the first time it's been available in 2 years or something like that. It's good to look at what's happened before and say, maybe this hasn't been available for, a year and a half, and try and give, I guess, a viewpoint of anybody who's going to be watching a video. Because I've seen comments of people who've literally picked up the game since Sinnoh. So even that event that for us is very, very recent in 2024, it may be the case that, like, I've never had a shiny Gibble, and we're like, well, we've had a 6-hour com day for it back in 2021. Then it's been featured in almost every other event. It's also been a quest in Eggs and in Sinnoh. But you've got to look at things from maybe a new player's perspective and an OG player's perspective and think, how can I bring the two of them together in the most watchable and compelling way that isn't dull?
Yeah. And these are the sorts of situations that always lead to us going like, oh my gosh, like we come full circle in some sort of way, that people that have been playing this game forever, like when I see a Pidgey, I vocally say, oh wow, a Pidgey every time now.
Oh yes. Because in the season, I forget the name of it. It was March to May of 2024. I genuinely forget what that season was called, even though it was only very recently. That suddenly brought Shiny Pidgey as a regular spawn back to the wild for what felt like the first time in 2 years. And even me as an OG player, I'm like, oh my God, I can get Shiny Pidgey. And then they never stopped shining, which was fantastic. And it was really good for bits of video content. But that is exactly where Lachlan's point of the person, Timmy, might need a Fearow. It was the elite raids for Mega Rayquaza where I met a family group and somebody was like, do you have a Torterra to trade? I'm like, technically no, but, and then you give the advice, say like, by the way, Turtwig is in a quest that you can find during this event window. So it's that sort of thing, like what could someone miss and how could they obtain it? If you give all the information you can in a sort of compact but interesting way, because bless YouTube and its attention span retention, it's not fantastic. Let's just put it that way.
No.
But I find myself not wanting to go too much down the shorts route for information. If you can expand it for a couple of minutes, be a bit more detailed about it, that should be more helpful for people. That's kind of, I think, the strategy, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. It is kind of wild to sort of see people almost specialize in, do you do long form, do you do medium form videos, but do more of them, or are you shorts based, or whatever your combination of like two of those three things are.
Middle ground.
And YouTube has done a very, there's lots of things to say about YouTube in any direction, but I think YouTube has done a very good job of kind of diversifying its product offerings is really kind of what it is,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and encouraging creators to go down that route for, discoverability and exposure and all that sorts of stuff. But speaking of products and things like that, it's weird to say it like that, but it is something that we both make. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say all three of us probably agree that podcasts are pretty cool.
Damn right.
We're fans, right? So you're one of now 3 of the Incensed podcast, pouring out for Coops. He's still alive, folks. He's just not on the show anymore.
It's not real.
Yeah, exactly. So we had Ian Waterfall on Star Piece already, not too, well, actually I guess it was a little bit ago now, but not too many episodes ago, I should say. So what is your perspective on the formation of the Incensed podcast? Because we got his before.
Mine should be fairly similar, I think, because again, it was during the pandemic days where we sort of, it was very recent to the scene. Mark and I had been making content for quite a few years at this point. In fact, since probably the inception of Pokemon GO. And Coops, I think, got going in about 2018, I believe it was, possibly 2019 as well. So they've been doing content for a little while. I begun my roots, and the pandemic, obviously once good old remote raids and the remote raid pass invite stuff became live, we formed a little, what was Twitter in the day, chat with newcomes as well. So it was like the the people we knew of at that time as UK Pokemon Go content creators, and we're like, we'll just ping each other invites, and we just chatted on that group very infrequently, really. Obviously, we couldn't really work out a meetup during 2020 at that sort of time. So it was a little way down the road. Ian and Mark had met each other a couple of times. I met Coops for the first time in, I think, December of 2020 when I was back doing my level 50 grind, and that was on the release of Shadow Wooper. What was Wooper Day?
Oh, Wooper Watch.
We love it.
Yeah,
I love
Wooper Watch.
Watch.
Remember that event?
I played 20 hours of Wooper Watch.
We played quite a bit because I needed to do something for a level 50 challenge at that point. So that was when we first met. And it wasn't too long after that honestly, Mark just threw out a random question. It's like, should we have a go at a podcast? And hysterically, I had written on my whiteboard at that point was podcast UK. I sort of just didn't put the question forward first. Mark did, and all of us were like, or Mark, Coops, and Ian and I were like, yeah, let's give it a go. And I think Newcomb's just didn't want to at that point. So then the four of us jumped on in, it would be early January. So this is the very beginning of 2021. Just jumped on Zoom just to have a chat. Literally was about, I think, an hour where we literally met each other for the first time, mostly. Chatted a bit. And it was the second week of February 2021 when, for the second time, we sat down together in Zoom and recorded our first show. So the second ever interaction I had with Master 27 and Ear Waterfall, you can listen to on episode 1 of that show. And since that point, it's kind of just been, we bonded and have grown very, very close as a friendship group and grown this product or podcast to where it is now, with people, supporting us, and now obviously knowing you guys as part of the Pokemon podcast kind of world. And it's honestly, as that journey is doing long form audio format, that's not something I ever saw myself doing, but I love it. And it's just been a fantastic journey over the last 3 and a bit years at this point.
Yeah, not only are you part of the show, you're also a huge part of the editing process too. So you have an added level of investment there.
Yes,
which is
the time.
Oh yeah. So has it sort of turned out as you expected? I know you just said that you would not have expected yourself to be in long form audio content.
Yeah.
But once you kind of got your head around the fact of, okay, yeah, we're going to do this podcast. You did a few episodes and you kind of saw where it was going. I mean, the four of you are traveling, or the three of you rather are traveling to all sorts of events. Like, again, we just saw you in New York, you and
City.
Ian. And you're talking to all these different content creators. You're mingling with fans out in the field. I mean, you're doing the whole thing. Did you expect it to get to that point?
I don't, honestly, if you'd asked me 3.5 years ago, I'd probably said, nah, don't be ridiculous. But you never know where things are going to go. And the rule, I think, of podcasts, if you get past episode 6, you're usually going to stick with it. The thumbs up from Lachlan there, actually, which is, I think, looking back at it, is to mention 2 of the creators who were on our live Madrid show and one of them was on our New York show, Zoe and Alan. They started doing a podcast, I think it was 22 actually, and they got to 5 or 6 episodes and then stopped. Really, doing a podcast, even if you don't go into so much detail like I do with the editing, and that's mainly my OCD and post-production just kicking in. If I didn't have post-production training, it probably wouldn't be as edited as heavily as it is. But there is a lot of time that goes into it. It's not just the recording, but you have to do the SEO, uploads, socials, and the more you grow your podcasts, I'm sure you guys have experienced, and particularly Chris, that you've been going for so many more years than us. The growth of where the podcast ends up going just brings more and more stuff onto your plate, really, which is where it's quite good to have a little team behind it. So I'm thankful that we have Ian and Mark and Sue and Francesco who can help out with socials, editing, obviously the 3 of us recording, etc. It's very much a team effort, which I'm incredibly thankful for.
Yes, and as a result, I mean, your social presence is bar none, and it does give sort of a sense that team sense definitely comes through, with the branding and then the presence of each of you also having individual, rather active social media accounts in addition to your branded show accounts. Kind of creates its own ecosystem, and that I think this is almost inside baseball, but this is one of those benefits of having a roster of hosts that pushes the boundary of maybe we're one short of too many. And for some people, you could say maybe it is too many. But even when it was 4 of you on, the 4 of you made it work because all of you had distinct personalities, distinct backgrounds, came together by the nature of the way that you met, which was sort of this organic, like, hey, we all make content in this generic area. You all didn't go to school together or something like that. So your perspectives are different because of that and so many other life experiences.
100%.
That is a rare thing, having that amount of chemistry with other people, especially that you had in some ways just met, right? So that's it. There's a bit of luck to that, but also definitely the amount of work that you and Marky and Ian and Coops too, because he helped build the show, right? That
from back in the day,
right? The work that you have all put into it is apparent, right? It definitely comes across.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm a fan, by the way. I mean, I know we've talked about this before in the past.
I know, and even on the shows we do together, but it's like,
yes.
It's really lovely to be in that podcast space now. And, we listen to your show and shows, shall we say. And, in the same way I said about other creators in the content creation space, like, okay, so what are they doing? Again, you'd be foolish as somebody in this podcast space, particularly of Pokemon Go, or maybe just Pokemon in general, to not listen to some other shows and go like, okay, how do they do certain things? I think actually one of the particular things which we've done now for a year or more is the cold open, which originated, I think, was it possibly from your first feature on our show, or it might have been a bit later, but we thought there's a lot of random rubbish that we talk about that's hysterical at the very beginning that usually only our patrons get to listen to. Why don't we put a little section of that at the beginning? And that stemmed from listening to GOCast, really, I think, because you guys take a section from your show and put it at the beginning.
Yeah, the story behind that's really funny because that actually extends to another podcast. From Adam for the Pokemon Professor Network. When we met at a Mareep Up, I know Lachlan, you've heard this story before, right? Yeah. And this was like forever ago. I think it was the very first Mareep Up that we were at, and we had put one episode out at that point, and we went to this like social with. This is back when Pokemon Go Radio was still putting out their show too, and Lured Up was there, and then we showed up to this bar. And Adam was like, I listened to your first episode. I think it's, great, yada, yada. He was so sweet about it. And he mentioned offhand, he was like, you gotta, one of the things that we got to try to do is like make hooks. Right. And so like a little bit of a cold open at the beginning would be amazing. And so we started adopting that relatively recently, and up till this point, with the exception of bonus episodes, because you got to edit those in a hotel room, push them out.
I know the feeling.
But they don't even do it. And we took that advice and ran with it. It definitely has. It adds something for sure. And I've been happy to hear it for your show too, because it kind of seems like a standard at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, we love doing it because we're like, right, we'll just hit record and then we'll just see what happens. And usually recording, it's like 15 to 20 minutes before we get going with the episode that we've sort of structured in the notes. That 15, 20 minutes can equal 30 seconds or maybe sometimes 4 or 5 minutes of a cold open. You have no idea what's going on, what the topic is, but it's usually not Pokemon Go related. So you let it run, really. And I think that's been a really nice update since we started doing that. From memory, and this is really me trying to track back through the memory banks, I think it might have been episode 101 where we began doing that. After our 100th show, then we thought, let's try a cold open, because that one on the recording was really funny, and we just stuck with it, really.
And I think largely the way cold opens work with like people who grew up watching TV. Like the point of the cold open on television is to hook you in with a mystery that makes you want to watch past the title sequence.
Yes.
Before we had that skip title sequence button that everyone does, and for people who skip the title sequence on Doctor Who, you know who you are. Stop.
You're missing out.
But like those cold opens, they lure you in. They incense an idea of what's to come.
Oh, nicely done.
And when you get that star piece, I don't know where that's going.
Jeez.
Of just just being able to get an idea of like, okay, this is for me, because we have the attention span now that's somehow been developed as a general humanity that if we're not interested in something in 10 seconds, we're moving on to something else.
Which is wild.
Like some days I'm just not vibing a song, and most songs in my playlist I know from the first 10 seconds, so I know just to skip through it. But you've got this element of just, this is what we are. If you're new here, it's chaotic, it's lovely, but there's a unity, there's a bromance between all three of you, that you just have this mutual respect, and it just works.
Yeah, and that relationship between now Mark, Ian, and I, back in the day would have been Coops as well, very much grew organically through the audio recordings. Obviously with chat off of recording as well when it came to bits of the show, and if we're going to do meetups later down the road. And it wasn't really until 6 months or so, no, tell a lie, 5 months, I believe, into doing the podcast that we actually met up for the first time ever, which was Tepig Community Day back in July 2021, where we all went over to Mark's neck of the woods, the rural trainer, as he was back in the day, very much a rural trainer then, and played that Community Day together. And that was kind of the first in-person exchange between all of us, because 2021, the Community Day before I met Ian for the first time in the flesh, and Coops obviously met in December of 2020. So growing that relationship, somewhat off of recording and camera, but mostly through the episodes, it sort of felt like a natural development, particularly with the sections that we do and pushing the boundaries of where we feel comfortable. And, in the early days, it would have been quite good to have the safety net of the edit, because in case of, if a joke gets pushed too far, which very rarely it seemed to. And I think that just came down to, as you say, the natural chemistry between all of us. You just feel the vibe and it seems right, and you can just play off of each other, and that person's not going to get offended if you chuck an insult at them, which frequently we did and still do. And even now at this point, it's almost more personal because we've been doing this now for so long that we know each other really well. So you can be properly harsh, but you can rock and roll with it.
Chris, don't you think Milo looks a little bit like a slack-off?
You mean the slack-off that's on my microphone?
That's right. I keep forgetting who to look at, and I get confused.
It's like me with your squeezed in Pikachu in the backdrop.
I'm honored to be compared to old school fat Pikachu. Honestly,
Pikachu.
that's really my personal Pokemon representation.
After we saw the 8th anniversary artwork, I can't wait for Gigantamax Pikachu to potentially be a thing soon, because that's going to be a raid. If it's a raid where the audio is on.
Oh my god!
Oh,
I haven't played with audio on for the longest time.
Well, that's okay. You just had it pumped straight into your ears at GOFest in the park for 3 days.
I know, dude. Oh my god, you'd have experienced this when you were recording your live show and stuff like that. Thanks for having us on, by the way. It was really fun to listen to.
Likewise.
Listen to that back, because when you do the live recordings, I'm quite good at keeping track, particularly with the show notes on Incensed, what's been said, and it will be a case of any one of us will exchange a look through the webcam and go, yeah, we can cut that a little bit. We can cut this. And I'm making mental notes of what we're doing. But when I'm doing somebody else's show, like we did in New York, I'm so sort of in the moment in the conversation. I had no idea what I said. So I listened to it back, and it was almost completely organic. I'm like, God, I was probably going on Ian.
Yeah. No, it was great. There wasn't a whole lot to cut, and yeah, we had a little bit of birds in the background, and the first bonus episode. I'm not sure if this happened when we were recording, but from day one when we did the segment with Gilly and with Mystic 7, the music turns on in the background too.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's just environmental hazards, like
where we were doing a section, I forget which one, but we were doing it, and then suddenly halfway through, it felt like whoever's in control of the speakers in the Pulsar Cabana just said, yeah, let's whack it up to 24, and suddenly the music was like deafening. Like, we're trying to record here and keep it consistent as the best we can do, and the music's going all over the place.
Oh yeah, like please. My compressor's not going to be good enough for this.
Yeah, exactly.
So, to pivot, because for listeners, our raw audio time's 4 years at the moment. So we've got to find something to pivot away from. Do not know where that British accent just came from. So pivoting on.
It was horrendous.
Milo's an influencer, so it makes sense.
I've heard his South African accent. It's not great.
Oh no!
He calls it.
It's not meant to be South African, but it comes out as South African, and even for South African, it's awful.
It's not a big accent, but you have to be very careful with the South African accent.
It's the thing of I don't know why we go high pitch with it. I do the same. It just becomes higher and higher pitched.
No, this is because this is what the South Africans that we have on television sound like when they're playing cricket. Okay, so
you watch that? Okay.
Oh no, I don't watch cricket. I watch Cricket 23.
I was about to say just Cricket 23. Oh, right. Goodness.
Thank you for taking the bait. Anyway,
what's this about pivoting?
So, obviously, we're talking about how we've all been playing Pokemon GO for 8 years now. And, 80 years, depending on how, your timelines are converging.
And how that joke's been cut.
Or has it?
It has.
Which joke?
South African accents.
I heard a rumor about pivoting.
So, looking at the longevity of Go, okay? So, obviously, Niantic are at the whims of Game Freak and Creatures creating new Pokemon, putting out more content to then eventually port over in some capacity into Pokemon Go, in addition to infusing their own ideas. And obviously, in the past 12 months, we've seen a lot of their own ideas coming into play. So that's routes. I said route. It's killing me to say route, but Chris gets very upset when I say route. So
incensed.
It's insane. Vegetable. So we've got routes. We have the party play. Which is seemingly inspired by the Indigo disc. We have, with like the play together tasks, we have all the quality of life stuff they've been rolling out this year. So obviously Niantic are doing their best to just put out content. And we have the Community Ambassador program, which is great. And the check-in process is great. Everyone gets free items for showing up in person. And it's better to play this game when you're out of a car. But where do you see this game going over the next 5 years? And are you in any way worried about how it's going to impact your now, it's your job. This is your job.
Yeah.
What's your fears around that?
Or lack thereof. I mean, if you're just like feeling blindly confident about it, I mean, we'd love to hear that too.
Yeah, I wish I could be. But
my man.
I think there's a lot of potential ways that things could go wrong with Pokemon Go, and from my standpoint, 2023, the remote raid nerf that was 23, wasn't it? Definitely.
Yeah.
So long ago, it feels. That was an enormous kick, and we won't dive into that because we'll be here until actually 2099. So. There are other facets of the game where things could go potentially a bit wrong. And one area for me that I don't do it because I despise it, only when there's actually decent rewards and I think I can have time to play it, is the GBL system, which has been in the game since pretty much the pandemic. I see endlessly on X the PvP community and the creators with that moaning about the lack of updates or the updates that get put in or don't get put in, what's here, what's that, new glitches, new ways to hack and cheat the system and all that stuff. And I look at it and go, you know what? That's such now a big part of the game, particularly with them delving into worlds and actually having, national championships and international championships around the stuff. That needs to be fixed, but it's not necessarily the main part of the game. They can do so much more with parts of the game, and I think even though maybe not everybody uses it, the function of routes and party play, they are evergreen features that can be updated or utilized for specific events and things like that. Particularly, for example, Sinotaur comes to mind with exclusive spawns on routes, and for Global Go Fest, we have or had the Pikachus being encounters through party play, which I think is a really good feature. The thing that I've always found that this probably hits more so with Lachlan, maybe in APAC, is when new features get added and they're not ready, or they are not fully fleshed out, and then it takes 6 months to add and develop to where it should have been. Prematurely adding things to the game without testing them, or maybe not to the fullest extent. I have no idea. Maybe they do test it and things go a bit wrong, but a bit more time and thought behind features that get added, because there could be a major feature that gets added in the future which hacks so many people off that it kills the community. I have no idea.
I think as an APACian, nearly got a spit take. Nearly got it.
I love that. Love that terminology.
It was close, yeah.
That
would have been a great thumbnail with Milo just...
Yeah. There's too much equipment for me to destroy. I have to hold off.
Turn around and do it.
Yeah.
While the dark days of, events being global time starting and ending were bad for communication's sake across time zones, let's just say those events, when they stopped working, they were fixed pretty quickly. I missed that. Because there's these small things throughout the game which you look at and you think, I know people have brought this up to the relevant parties. Why is this still a thing? And for example, something I know won't be fixed by the time this episode goes out, even in the year 2090, will be that on the Go++, when you track your sleep,
you're going to make me cry a lot.
There are 6 days of the week where you get 2,500 Stardust for having a good night's sleep. On Saturday, you always get less than that. For whatever reason, it's less Stardust for having a good night's sleep on a Friday night. The same amount of sleep. It is insane to me, and it's such a small thing, but I'm the one that's
I've never noticed.
I've never noticed that either.
I don't know. I just don't look because I'm like, I'll do it for the buddy hearts.
I've been tracking my sleep with my Go++ now for over 52 weeks. Or about that, I think. Because I think Pokemon Sleep's a year old now, so that would probably make sense.
It's just about... It was available in other countries first. I think you guys got it first, and then we were like a week or two behind in Europe.
So that is about 30,000 Stardust they've stolen from me.
Invoice them.
Oh my days.
So there's just these small things that I guarantee you, if they were happening in local time, they'd be fixed. We have, issues where they put out an X post.
A post,
yeah. A post, yeah.
I still got to call it a Zeet because it's just easier in my head.
And you don't get it confused with literally every other platform that uses a generic thing like post.
We'll do a make good for this. 3 weeks later, here's a Poffin.
Bro, don't even get started on the compensation for things. Oh my goodness.
And which is why the Community Ambassador program gives me hope, because you show up in person to a community, you've got at least 20 or so people. I think that's like the minimum threshold, or maybe it's 10. So you've got people to play with, you've got people to raid with, and Niantic rewards those communities for consistency by checking in for premium currency and premium items. The fact that if you go to an in-person raid that's hosted by a community ambassador, you check in on Campfire, you get some premium raid passes. except during last week's or a month ago's Ultra Beast Raid Week, where it was 1 because it was 5 in the week. But so you sort of understand that. It's still 5 premium raid passes just for hanging out with friends. That's pretty cool. You know, and on Spotlight Hour, here's an incense just for showing up to Spotlight Hour. That covers your hour of Spotlight Hour, and it promotes a good podcast. So, like...
Nicely done.
And the codes you get from Community Day promote our podcast, so it's fine. Because they give you the star piece.
They do.
Hey.
They do indeed. And if there's ever a Mysterious Component or Rocket Radar podcast, they get that too. On
every once in a
research.
While. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. There are many events that I remember where things went wrong and then the compensation for it was, let's say, lackluster.
Oh, here's an extra
one that
2
comes
hours.
To mind. No. One that comes to mind was the... when there's been waves of Shadow Shinies that weren't active for like a day or two, and they go compensation. Here is a box with 3 rocket radars in it. It's like, I've done 100 leaders. Where are my X amount of whatever? But they don't give it back to you. I think that's just something we have to be careful of in the future.
My favorite one this year was Tornadus Raid Hour in APAC. The shiny wasn't enabled. And this was a return of a Tornadus, so its shiny had previously been on, and for some reason,
I remember that
back end. And like, here's some compensation. Here is 3 raid passes and a remote raid pass, and you couldn't claim that box in the shop if you had 3 remote raid passes.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And that box is still sitting in some people's stores because it's there till February 2025. And I'm like, okay, sure.
Again, yikes. Yikes.
I think we're going down a little bit of a rabbit hole with some of like the stories of the past, but
a little bit
in terms of content for the future, you know, I think there's so much more potential that outweighs possible negativity. Let's say that, because from where we're sitting right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is it February 2025 when Legends ZA drops, or is that later in 2025?
The release month/window is just said to be 2025. So
just 2025. So it could be November. We don't know.
I have a feeling it's going to be the big November game for next year.
Potentially, yeah. But now that branch of main series Pokemon games is a thing, and they're clearly progressing with that. We had a nice crossover, even though it was minimal at the time, with Legends Arceus. I think they only dropped Hisuian Voltorb from memory. That was it. And then a few more Hisuians got put into 7km eggs way back in the day. There's so much more potential with what they could do if they start going down Legends games or main series games. And as we've said previously, there are constantly new players to this game who haven't played 5 different Squirtle community days.
Right.
So there's always potential to backtrack on an event or revisit a type of event, but maybe tweak it and change it so it's interesting for everybody. You know, it gives me hope that certainly with how content's being released as of recent is that they can stretch things to then overlap with when a new generation gets released and then even further on. So I think for sure we're going to be safe until probably generation maybe 12, I think, in terms of content, because there'll be another Legends game in between, or there'll be another kind of development that crosses over with another style of Pokemon game, or they'll do some updates and, you know.
Or if we got like Pokemon GO Mystery Dungeon, I'd be down for that.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That would be fun. And get the different version of Kecleon.
Purple Kecleon.
True.
Yeah, the purple Kecleon. I have the plushie for that. I'm like, when I was that was Worlds 2022, I think, in London. I was going around the shop and I saw the 2 different Kecleons, and I said to Francesco, I was like, what on earth is this purple one? 'Cause it's not the shiny. I know it's not. He's like, it's a big brother. Like, that was a terrible TV show, I remember.
So here at the GOCast Network, we are big on one thing, and every week Chris and Kyle set their goals for where they're going. So what are your goals for the next, let's say, financial year?
Ooh.
So next
like
12
that.
months. Sorry, Americans. We don't use your silly March 1st tax date or whatever it is.
Well, it kind of depends on the type of business you are, but yeah.
really, it needs to be a big push on YouTube and getting eyes on the channel, to be honest. And how I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to take a leaf out of Pokédex's book, where he's doing all kinds of different styles of content and different approaches to challenges, and try almost anything and everything to make a different style of video, and then see what gels, really. So it's all about trying to push the channel to keep on growing and maybe experimenting with some different styles of content, because the loyal following I have is really, really good and has been really, really nice and stable. It's the YouTube side of things where, as I said, you're very much at the whim of what style of event is going on, trying to maybe have a different approach about that. So kind of not necessarily reevaluating, but having a fresh perspective, I'd say, and seeing where I can go with what gets put on our plate in terms of Pokemon Go events or live events. We have no idea what's coming up later in 2024, and it'll be very interesting to see the possibilities.
Well, I for one, am looking forward to the GOCast meetup, Chris.
Yeah, October, it's happening, and it's going to be lining up quite well with when Lachlan is in country for another event. And so,
he's traveling over.
Yes, he is. He's coming
GoFest
for a wedding.
The GOCast meetup.
Priorities, correct.
Exactly right. Awesome. Well, we're gonna start wrapping up the show here, because you've been very generous with your time, Milo, and we very much appreciate it. But we do have a
long enough wait.
Hey,
it really has.
Look, it's been a busy time, and it's almost comical that the time that worked out was between New York and Global, where I know both of us, all three of us, because of community master stuff too for Lachlan, we're all rather busy.
Yeah,
this is the week it shouldn't have worked out, and it did.
It's definitely not. It's definitely not 2 a.m. for me. That's fine.
No, certainly not. Certainly not.
So I salute you, Lachlan, for the early hours.
Lachlan is the top example of a team player. We love him.
So when you come on next, Milo, it's going to be 2 a.m. for you, just so you know.
Yes, in the interest of fairness, we do have to rotate.
We have to rotate.
I'll have to rotate that. Okay,
right.
okay, that's a verbal contract there.
I'll take the nice midday recording slot for me.
Oh, jeez. We have a static question that we ask everybody that comes on, and this question is, given the clef key to the city of Pokemon design, what would be your first priority? And this has been interpreted several different ways since we've asked it. We always point to the first example, which is Cricket, who wanted to have a rave with a unicorn horn costumed Pikachu. But you could go so far as to say, this Pokemon deserves a regional variant, and here's what I think it should be. Or we're missing this type of Pokemon from this animal that they haven't made one from, or item, I guess. Objects work too. Who knows? It could be anything. So if you had an opportunity to force the hand of Pokemon design in one particular Pokemon, what would you do?
You could make
That's a very, very good question, and very difficult.
Croydon Pikachu a real thing.
That would be amazing, but that's not my creation to tell. Or it was sketched by Nakeem, one of my local crew. But I'm trying to think back, because that was so long ago on Incensed. Who originally came up with it? I don't know. Track back to episode 30.
Just
I think
send Ian a text. He'll tell you all the information about it.
I know it was episode 30. I'm fairly sure it was that. But do you know what? Because it's actually in not only your question, but it was heavily, heavily featured in all the Go Fest for this year. And at the moment, it can't be shiny. Klefki, give it some different regional forms that are various different types of key. So you could...
So France gets the toddler's toy.
You can get a toddler toy one. You can get like a really, really old castle kind of style of key. You can get there's a car key, an analog sort of thing, a mailbox key, and they all have, I don't know, slightly different abilities or movesets. Yeah. And you could literally just go. There's so many different types of keys. Obviously, even an Allen key Anybody who's a fan of assembling IKEA furniture.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the Swedish version. Okay, yep.
Could be a
Swedish
Halloween
variant.
costume, skeleton key.
Yes, exactly. Skeleton keys would
That
be
could be
fantastic.
the ghost fairy type. We do need a ghost
Yeah.
fairy.
Ooh. See, I think a ton of different regional variants of Klefki would be a very interesting take, because I guess it wouldn't be too dissimilar from Scatterbug and its evolutions in terms of patterns. You could have they're not different patterns, but they're different styles of key or forms. Obviously, is the idea. You have a UFO key or something. It's just like a glowing stick.
There's like a key card on a lanyard.
Oh my god! One's just a credit card,
And it just and you get it by using an upgrade.
yes.
and Porygon comes out and it's like, here you go.
But no, that's an excellent answer. You've given lots of examples too. We love that. You went the extra mile, Milo. Thank
Bouncing
you.
off each other. It's fantastic.
That's right. That's right. Milo, we also leave at the very end the opportunity for our guest to pose a question to us of your choosing. So have you had a chance to think about it? And if so, what you got?
So I had a little think about this, and you guys opted to keep this as a surprise.
Yes.
Definitely. So if you two had to collab and make a podcast, but it wasn't Pokemon Go related, what topic or style of podcast would you land on?
Oh, for Lachlan and I to do together?
Yes, because I know from a fact you guys both share a musical kind of interest.
That's true. This is true.
I think movies. I'd like just sit and chat about a movie. I think Chris and I could both go in depth about a lot of films.
Mm-hmm.
And as a film expert yourself, you could be a recurring guest. I don't know. I could go into a good 4-hour video. Like if I had the time, says me, I would probably write 7-hour video essays every week about Thomas the Tank Engine and the Magic Railroad.
Do you mean this sincerely? Is this a side of you that I don't know? You're big on Thomas the Tank Engine?
Well, ever since Milo said that he's been into cars, I'm like, trains. I've been into trains since that same age.
Trains are cool.
So I've had trains
are
on my
very cool.
mind this entire recording.
We need a train Pokemon.
We do. I mean, we've got Charge-a-Bug, which is close, the little subway.
It's like
but
a little
it's not
bus.
a proper train.
And there's the one that looks like a bunch of coal.
Carcoal
Yeah,
and
Carcoal.
Roly-Coly
That's it.
and Colossal.
Roly-Coly, that's it.
Colossal, which is one of the
we
best
need a
names.
proper locomotive one. Like we
I
have
agree.
Varoom that looks like a moped engine.
Yes, exactly right.
Well, we better get the other forms of Revavroom at some point as well. I want the Starmobiles.
Regional variants of that Pokemon would be wild.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Can we
You
get
could
like a
use,
Mad
you could
Max
use your
style?
Klefki.
Yeah. Oh man, a Mad Max style would be so good.
Fusions between the regional forms of Klefki we've created and the different versions of Revavroom.
Speaking of movies, Furiosa was incredible.
I haven't seen that one yet.
You
but
gotta go. Oh, it was really, really good. It was really, really good.
But no,
so I mean,
films.
I think movies is a great answer to this question. I think we could also probably talk politics for a long time. And especially like cross-cultural comparison stuff. It's always really interesting to hear, how different places label things and view them differently, right? So that would be fun, although probably a spicy podcast.
I say there's a juicy podcast subject right there.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I like discussing ideologies in general, political or otherwise. And I think people that are in that space have the chops for it, abstract topics, always a good thing to talk about for a long time.
Political films exclusively.
So going really niche.
we could just
we could start with
campaign
Civil War.
ads analysis. Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, that would be the most polarizing podcast we could possibly make. That'd be amazing. Now, for the safe bet, let's stick with movies. That's always good.
Let's take the safe option.
Yeah.
So Ghostbusters 20, just Ghostbusters in the 20s. What was that? What was that? 2016? The Kirsten Wiig Ghostbusters.
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I didn't see that one.
That was the was
Chris,
it like a reboot or something?
You need to watch it. It is so good. I love it.
Okay. All right.
It's a guilty pleasure movie for me. Like, I love the concept of Ghostbusters in general, but just that movie, just it's similar enough. But then you got like the living like original cast coming in completely different roles, and one of them gets thrown out a window, and you're like, where did this come from?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'll have to give it a watch.
For me, it's like it's like a scary movie version of Ghostbusters, but it takes itself a little bit more seriously than those films. You know how like
scary movie.
You know how like the actors in Scary Movie take themselves seriously when delivering all the dialogue?
Yeah.
But then all the extras don't?
Yes.
Yeah. It's that.
It's
like,
okay.
I love it. Like Melissa McCarthy, she makes a good Ghostbuster.
Okay.
And Chris Hemsworth, now he is a good phone answerer.
He's a good phone answerer.
I won't
Chris
say
Hemsworth
anymore
in general.
for people who hasn't seen the movie.
Thumbs up. Yeah. All right. Well, I think this is wrapping it up here. At the very end, Mr. Milo, would you like to plug your show and or podcast, please?
I would be honored to do so. So thank you very much for having me on, boys. It's been really, really good fun. So my solo content, you can find me. It's PoGoMiloUK. Pogo is in Pokemon Go. Milo is me, and the UK is where I am from. And it's the same across most socials, like X and Instagram are basically where I post. I don't do what Ian does with the podcast and do threads. Can't be bothered. But in terms of Incensed podcast, Incensed as in the item or being slightly hacked off podcast, and we are that across socials, and we have a variety of different contact methods. If you want to listen to the show and get in contact with us, you can find them all on our podcast show note, footnotes, whatever they are. So yeah, drop us a download, please. It'd be fabulous. But again, boys, it's been fabulous to jump on with you. Much overdue, because I think we started chatting, what was it, before LA?
Yeah, it was a while ago. It was a hot minute ago.
Let's
for
do
sure.
March, then it got wild, and then, yeah, as you say, very funny that between New York and Global, the time worked.
Yeah. I was thankful.
I was literally on that couch, and we still couldn't make a time work.
Exactly, yeah.
This one was
actually in my house.
Yes.
Couldn't do it.
Again, on all accounts, probably should have been and would have been easier on paper at any other time, but whatever.
You say that. On paper, it was easier.
That's right. Exactly
we had a
right.
master ball to get. It was very important.
Yeah. Understood, boys. I get it. Well, anyway, Milo, it was an honor to have you. You're always welcome back, and I hope we get to do some more cross content in the future, because it's always a good time. Always 100%. A good time.
Thank you, boys.
Thank you, Lachlan, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.